Today's daf we're going to be learning is Chullin daf Samach Gimel. We're going to continue to do two main things today, which is continue with a list of birds, identifying certain birds and saying whether they're kosher or not kosher. There's two ways you could really learn this. One is to really take a book like the Quran, for example, which has exactly the identity of all these birds and try to make some sense out of it. Or you can just sort of say, okay, these are the names they give, and let's just assume, okay, that's kosher bird, that's not a kosher bird. Again, it depends whether you're learning it for Daf Yomi purposes. I'll try to follow along with the Quran and give you the identity. Again, some of them are very obvious. Some of them are debates with what the identity of them exactly is, but I'll try to fit it in as we go along. Okay, and then the second thing we're going to do is get to the list of, now we already know there's 24 non-kosher birds, but you're going to find out today that that's a little bit strange that they say there's 24, because in the Torah that's not exactly how many appear. So we're going to have to do a bit of a numbers game and a playing around to figure out how we got to these numbers, and we're going to see that there's two opinions, 24 and 23. So we're going to actually figure that all out, and for that we're going to use the study guide, which will be immensely helpful. Okay. Amar Rav Yehuda, Shekitna ariche shake v'sumake sharia. Okay, the long, I'm going to read here, it's very easy to read this from the current translation, they explain these things well. The long shanked red ones are permitted, okay, v'simanech, and the way to remember this is the more zima, which is probably, okay, they claim here it's a type of bird, okay, which was with a red body and long legs. And therefore, right, so we're talking about this bird with long legs that's red. So the way you remember it is because there's another red long-legged bird called the merzuma, which everybody knows. Okay, you might not, but everyone in those days obviously knew what it was, and that was the way to remember. Good sevesumake, but if it has short legs and it's red, asire, then it's forbidden. V'simanech, how do you remember this? Nanus pasul. Okay, the nanus is a very short person, who is actually, this is like a dwarf priest, they call it, and is disqualified from being a kohen. So that's how you remember this is not a kosher bird because it's very short-legged. Riche shakev yeruke. Now, if it's long-shanked but it's green, asire. And how do you remember that? Simanech. This goes back to a Mishnah we saw earlier in our chapter. Yerukim psulim. Remember, the innards turn green and then it's bad. So if you remember that, they turn green, it's bad. The bird that's green is bad. Okay, you have the same red and green that were there as well. Amar Rav Yehuda, shalach. Okay, shalach is one of the kosher birds, the non-kosher birds in the list in the Torah. Okay, so the Quran says this is probably the fish owl. Okay, Right. Oh, and the shekina, by the way, they say, I forgot to mention this. The shekina, they say, is the flamingo. Okay? So, or probably, and apparently the flamingo. All this is conjecture for the most part. So that's why, okay, the shalach, they say, is possibly the fish owl. Zeh sholed dagim min hayam. Okay, what's the unique about the shalach? How do you know to identify it? It takes the fish out of the sea. Duchifat. Okay, this is so duchifat, they say, refers to the hupo. Okay, this is it's a bird with an orange fringe on its head, and you're going to see the way they describe it here. Hodo kafut. Hodo means its glory, which is the fringe on its head, is bowed. Okay, it's bent down. That's how you remember it. Tanya namihachi. There's a braita that supports this. Duchifat shodo kafut v'zeh zeu shevi shamir lebeit hamikdash. If you remember, you're not allowed to use any metal implements to carve anything in the temple. So they used the shamir. The shamir was a worm that would eat away at things, and that would help. That would be how they would shape things in the temple. So that's how you remember it. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan, ki avachaz shalach. When he saw a shalach, he would say, because they go deep into the water to get the fish, he would say, Mishpatecha tehom rabbah. He would use the pasuk that God's laws, God's justice goes down to the depths. And the explanation that Rashi gives is that basically it would, these birds would basically take out God's revenge on the fish that were deserving of death. Okay, and that's why they would take them out from the bottom of the sea. And you see how God's justice goes down to the depths. This is unconnected to our sugya, but since when he would see a shalach, he would say that pasuk. When he would see an ant, he would say, Amar tzikatecha kahar re'el. Okay, your righteousness of God is like the gigantic mountains. Okay, so there's different explanations. Could be because he brings life and sustenance to such a tiny creature, right, like an ant, you see how amazing God's righteousness is. Amar Amemar, lakne ubatne. Okay, here they don't even try to give explanations. I guess they don't know what they are. Sharian, they're permitted. Saknai ubatnai, makom shnagu le'echol ochlim, makom shnagu shalo le'echol lo en ochlim. Okay, so these two, the saknai and the batnai, it depends on where you live. Some places, now, here it sounds like it depends on the custom of the land, which usually means like some people are strict and some people are not, which Tosfot actually does explain it in that way, but the more standard explanation here, what we're going to see as we go on, which is Rashi's, which is Atav ben Hagat Haliyam. Wait, the Gemara asks, how could this be? Either it's kosher or it's not kosher. Like, what does it mean? It depends on minhag. No, it really does, velo kasha, but don't find this difficult because, okay, again, this is Rashi's interpretation, the way I'm going to read this next line. Haba atra de shlichei peres vosnia, haba atra de lo shlichei peres vosnia. Okay, so in a place where it's not really a difference of custom. That's why it's a weird explanation, because it did say makom shenagu, but they're going to say it's not really based on custom. It's based on where you live, and it all depends on the reality. If there's a Paris and Ozniah where you live, now we're going to learn that these obviously have one siman of kashrut, just like the Paris and the Ozniah, and therefore there was concern you would confuse it with the Paris and the Ozniah. So if you live in a place where there's Paris and Ozniah, you're not allowed to eat them. And if you live in a different place, then you are. According to Rashi, the weakness of it is it becomes really like asur and mutal, and not really based on, well, we're just doing the minhag like this, the minhag like that. So that's why Tosfot prefers a different explanation where it's actually not forbidden to anyone, but some are machmir, some are mekel, kind of looking at it differently. But we're going to leave that aside. Well, let's just explain like Rashi. Amar Abai, kvai v'kakvai asire, kakvata sharia. Okay, you can see these birds all sound kind of the same. Okay, so the note here says in the Koran, elsewhere geese are referred to as kakai, and it is therefore likely these birds are similar, okay, to the geese family, but we're not sure exactly. But there's different types. Some are forbidden, some are permitted. So they say this kakvata, which they permitted in Babylonia, in Israel they forbade, and not only did they forbid it, if you ate it, they would give you lashes, meaning it's not even like it's a suffix, maybe it's not kosher. They said it's definitively not kosher, and that's also very interesting. In Babylonia, the tradition was we can completely eat this, and in Israel, they said absolutely not. And the name they had for that bird was a different name. It was tachvata. Okay, today we're going to see a lot of different names for the same things. Tanu Rabbanan, tin shemet. Okay, tin shemet is the ba'ut shebe'ofot. Okay, what is ba'ut? So they quote here, according to the Marshal, ba'ut is not a species name, but a word meaning disgusting. Okay, it's the disgusting one of the, okay, it's like the most disgusting bird there is. And soon we're going to see the ba'ut shebeshvatzim, the most disgusting creepy crawler that there is. So the tin shemet is the ba'ut shebe'ofot. Now we have a bit of a problem though with the tin shemet. The tin shemet is one of the lists of the kosher bird, of the non-kosher birds. It's also in the list, okay, in Vayikra chapter 11, which is our chapter with all the kashrut. It has a list of all the animals, what's kosher, birds, what's not kosher, and then right by animals it lists what is kosher with a few exceptions. But the main list is what's kosher. In the birds it lists what's not kosher. And then it gets into the creepy crawlers, and it says the Shmona Shvatzim, that are the very famous Shmona Shvatzim. Now, in the list of the Shvatzim is the tin shemet, and in the list of birds is the tin shemet. So it's very weird. So they say here, tin shemet is the ba'ut shebe'ofot. It's the disgusting of the birds. So atalmil ba'ut shebe'ofot o eno ela ba'ut shebeshvatzim, right? You say it's the ba'ut of the birds, but maybe it's the ba'ut of the shvatzim. And we're talking about creepy crawlers and not creeping animals. Amarta tzeu l'ma mishlosh esrei midot she'Torah nidresha behem. Remember, there's all these hermeneutic principles. Davar halamei mi'inyan. No, one of them is, okay, it's a basic, besides being a hermeneutic principle, it's a basic principle in general. Learn from association, like what the hekshir, I can't think of the word, but right from the context. Okay, take it from the context. So we're in the list of non-kosher birds. Of course, it's a bird. You can't say it's a creepy crawler when we're talking about a creeping animal, when we're talking about the birds. So since the whole list anyway there is about the birds, this must be a bird also. And in fact, Tanya Mihachi, we're going to see the same exact Braita, Ki Agavna, and the same. Now, usually Tanya Mihachi says exactly like this appears somewhere in a Braita, but now they're going to say Ki Agavna. It's very similar, okay, because now you're going to see they do the exact same thing to the one that appears by the Shratzim. Tin Shemet Ba'ucha B'Shratzim. It's the most disgusting of all the Shratzim. Ata Omer Ba'ucha B'Shratzim O Eino Ela Ba'ucha B'Ofot. Maybe it's the Ba'ucha B'Ofot. Not maybe the Tin Shemet is the one listed by the birds. Maybe it's a bird here. O Eino Ela, but right? Amarta Tzeu L'Mam Shlosh Midot Shatorah Nidresha B'Hem Davar L'Mei Mi'inyano. Again, let's take one of the 13 hermeneutic principles, which is learned from its context. So since the context there is the creeping animals, therefore must be a creeping animal and not a bird. So basically what we learn is there's two things called the tin shamet. Okay, one crawls on the ground, one flies in the air. Amrabai, but uchabofot, if you want to know what this is, it's a kipof. Okay, so the Koran here says that according to Rashi, this refers to the bat. Okay, the sages note elsewhere that he has eyes in front of its head and jaws like a human. Okay, but ucha b'tzratzim korpidai. Okay, here they don't explain what that is. Okay, but a korpidai, right? Some things we just have to let it go. We don't know necessarily what they are. Amar Rav Yehuda ka'at zohakuk racham zo shrakrak. Okay, the ka'at they say here some people identify as the little owl. Okay, other potentials are the pelican or the cuckoo. And rachak is, they say, is zoshrakrak. Okay, a shrakrak, it comes from whistling. It's a bird that whistles. So they say here it's a colorful bird around the size of a jackdaw. Which, I don't know if you know what that is. With a slightly hooked beak. It preys on small mammals, reptiles, and insects. Rav Sadiqon identifies it as the Egyptian vulture. So again, there's different opinions and different traditions about what these birds were. So now they want to know about this shrakrak. We're going to learn all sorts of interesting things about the shrakrak. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, lama nikra shmo racham? If it's really a shrakrak, then why call it a racham? This is always when things have two names, we have to explain, and often it's a drasha kind of name. Now racham comes from lirachem, have mercy. So why is it called racham? And it's also called shrakrak, which comes from to whistle. So we're going to put the two together. When the racham comes, we know it's a sign. When you see the racham bird, you know it's a sign that mercy is coming to the world. It's only if it sits on something and whistles. Okay, that's the connection. When you hear this bird whistling, you know that mercy is coming. It's something good. It's good news. It's the bearer of good news. Ugemire, now they say, and we have a tradition that's going to lead to an interesting story. That if it sits on the ground, not on something, but it sits on the ground and whistles, ata mashiach, that the Mashiach is coming. Okay, that is the best news, right? So when that happens, it's a sign of the Mashiach coming. How do we know this? Where do we get this from? From a pasuk in Zechariah, Shneimar eshraka lahem va'akabtzem. Okay, I will whistle to you and I will gather you. So this is this idea, right? It's really God saying, I will whistle, but the idea being that where will the whistle come from? It'll come from the mouth of this bird. So it's kind of like a God-sent bird. Okay, which you can almost kind of call a navi, which is going to lead us to this next, right, like a prophet. Amalei Rav Ad bar Shimi Lemar bar of Idai, v'hahahu diyativ bekrava. There was a case where there was a racham that sat down in a plowed field, ushrak. Now, sitting in a plowed field and whistled, that would be a sign of the Mashiach. Well, not only did the Mashiach not come, which we know because the Mashiach hasn't come yet, but ata galal, a stone came right away, afsakei lemoche, and basically cut its head off, okay? So immediately that bird was killed. So not only did the Mashiach not come, but the bird was killed. Amarle, so Ravi, right, and basically saying, I don't get it. You just said that that's a sign the Mashiach is coming. How could the bird have gotten killed? To which they say, it's all connected. Amarle, he explains to him, Hahu bai dahava. This was a lying bird, okay? Like a false prophet. And because it was a false prophet, it got killed, okay? So basically, you see how much they view this bird as really a prophet. That the bird whistled, and it wasn't really true. It was as if telling everyone the Mashiach was coming, but it didn't really come, so it had to die. Okay, moving on. Tanu Rabbanan, Orev. Now we're up to the Orev in the Pasuk, okay? It's Orev Lemina. So, let me know. So, Ze Orev. So now we have to darshan this pasuk. it says, let me just get the whole pasuk. It says, ve'et kol orev lemino. I knew I was missing a word. Et kol orev lemino. So now we're going to darshan all those words. Okay, instead of just saying ve'et shamed and et shalach and the way they say them all, this has a few extra words. So Tanu Rabbanan, orev ze orev. Okay, they basically, so ze orev, again, like I said the other day, they call the orev the crow. Okay, even though often orev is translated as a raven. Okay, they are in the same family. Okay, but they say the orev is a crow. Et kol ha'orev lahavi orev ha'amki, which they say here is often identified as the Eurasian magpie, which is also in the crow family. Limino, so we have the et kol, which includes one additional one, and limino lahavi orev haba berashe yoni. We're going to have to explain what this means, but literally it means an orev that comes at the heads of the pigeons. Okay, so we're going to now break apart this whole braita that we just read. It's only 3 lines, but let's go. Amar, orev ze orev. So they say, atu kamankai. What, like, this is what you learn when you're a kid, or when you get older, I don't know, at some point you learn this. Don't ever define a word by giving the word itself, right? You can't define a word with that word. So how could you say an orev is an orev? That didn't help me. What? Like, I know what an orev is. The whole idea is we're trying to explain what is an orev. So ela'ema orev ze orev ukama. What they meant is the black crow. V'cheinu omer, and how do we know this? Because it says on the pasuk, kfutzotav tatalim shechorot. This is in Shir Hashirim. Ke'orev. Okay, his curls are black like a crow. Ha'amki. Chivara. That's the one that's amki is white. Chenu omer mar'eu amok min ha'ol. How did they get from amki to, right? Usually amki means of the valley, but amok is deep. And in the psukim about the leper, it actually says when you have a leprous mark and the way it looks is deeper than the skin. It doesn't really mean deeper than the skin. What does it mean there? It means lighter than the skin because leprous marks are white. The way the sun appears deeper than the shade, meaning, right, deeper doesn't mean, deeper actually means lighter here. Okay, so here we have the word amok goes with light, and that's how we know it's the white crow. Don't say it means it leads the pigeons, right? That, this orev goes and all the pigeons follow. No, that's not what it means. Its head looks like the head of a pigeon. Tanu Rabbanan, hanetz. Okay, the netz is usually known to be a hawk. Okay, this is again on the list of non-kosher birds. Ze hanetz. Okay, this time they didn't complain. I guess everyone just knew what a netz was, so it was obvious. Liminehu, now the word liminehu appears there. Okay, we're going to see this soon. That limineo or liminehu or limina appears 4 times in the psukim, 4 times in Vayikra, 4 times in Devarim. We're going to compare them in a bit. So hanetz liminehu is lahavi bar chirya. Okay, another bird called the bar chirya, which they don't identify here. My bar chirya. Okay, so even the Gemara didn't know what a bar chirya was. Amar Abaye shurinka. It's called the shurinka, which doesn't help us, but obviously helped Abaye. He knew what a shurinka was. Amar Rav Yehuda, ha-chasida. Okay, chasida is a stork. Okay, if you grew up in Israel, right, so the chasida and the duchifat and all these are birds that everybody knows. Growing up in America, I certainly didn't know much about birds. I'm sure there are people who do, but I certainly didn't grow up that way. But my kids grew up learning about all these birds. You learn about them a lot in Gan. Okay, so Amar Rav Yehuda, chasida zo daya levana. Okay, so there they're describing it's called a white daya. Lamanikha, we're going to talk about the daya. Daya is another type of bird, but this is a white daya. Lamanikha shma chasida. Why is it called a chasida? She'oseh chasidut im chavrotah, because it shares its food with others. Ha'anafa, that's another one in the list. Zo daya ragzanit. In fact, zanit is irritable. Okay? Lamanikha shma anafa shemina efet im chavrotah, because it fights, it quarrels with all the others. Okay, so these are basically get their name from their character. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rav Chisda Amar Rav Chisda. Okay, now we're going to have a whole long thing, and I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can understand what's going on here. Okay, now we're going to get to the numbers. So that was just a list of all different birds. Are they kosher? Are they not kosher? And then, and then we're going to get to, some were birds not on this list. Some were trying to identify the birds on this list. Interesting that they didn't go through every single bird on the list. Okay, but before we start and we read what Rav Chanan says, I want to start with the Vayikra and Devarim. Okay, so we're just going to look at this list for a minute and study it for a brief. This chart is very helpful. It was very helpful to me to chart this out and see how this looks. So we have the Nesher is the first, the Peres is the second, Osniah is the third, both in Vayikra and in Devarim. Number 4, things start getting complicated. We have the Da'ah on the side of Vayikra, and we have the Ra'ah in Devarim. Now, Dalet and Reish get switched a lot, okay? So, could be it's the same bird, we don't know. But right now, we have a difference already. Difference number 1. Number 5, there's another difference, which is in Vayikra, it says Ha'aya limina, and on the Devarim, it just says Ha'aya, and it doesn't say limina. Okay, if you see bolded here, we have 4, as I told you, limina, limino, limineu, and limina. All the others are the same, okay? Where the limino appears in the same in Vayikra and in Devarim, but this one is different because the ayah is limina, and then the next one, okay, here's a huge difference. Okay, so first of all, the ayah in Devarim doesn't have limina, and in number 6, we have kol orev limino, which is only number 7 in Devarim, because we have a different one that doesn't appear at all in Sefer Vayikra, and that's why in Vayikra we're going to see there's 21. And in Vayikra there's 20, and in Devarim there's 21, because this one, Hadaya Lamina, appears only in Devarim and not in Vayikra. So we have an extra one, and that's the Daya. So we actually have 2 extra, because we have the Ra'ah and the Daya, but the Ra'ah we don't have, it's the one opposite at Hada'ah, we don't have it all in Devarim, but this one is an extra which pushes everything off one. So you see, Kol Orev Limino is 6 in Vayikra, but it's 7 in Devarim. The Bat Hayana is 7 in Vayikra, 8 in Devarim. HaTachmes, again, we're just going down. HaShachaf, HaNetz Limineu, HaKos, okay, until number 11 in Vayikra, we have basically whatever is the number in Vayikra, it's the next number in Devarim. At 12, we have another difference. This is a minor difference. We're not going to talk about this, but the Shalach that we saw before appears in Vayikra as number 12. For whatever reason, it appears as number 17 in Devarim. Okay, I don't know why that is, but it just switches order. So therefore, if you're following, number 13, 14, 15, and 16 are all parallel now, back to the same. Yanshuf, Yanshuf, Tinshemet, Tinshemet, Hakat, Hakat, Rechem, Rachma. Now, because 17 is now Hashalach, now we're going to be off again. And 17 in Vayikra is Chasidah, and in Devarim, Chasidah is number 18. Ha'anafa is number 18. And Hanafa Labina and Hanafa Lamina is number 18 and 19, respectively, right? Vayikra Devarim. Then we have Duchifat, and then we have Atalef. So we end with, the Vayikra has 20, and Devarim has 21. And the whole mess up happens because this word, Hadaya Lamina, this one type of bird, doesn't appear at all in Vayikra, and that's why Devarim has an extra. Okay, the main focus of today is going to be on numbers 4, 5, and 6. Da'ara'ah, Ayah Lamina Ayah, and Hadaya Lamina. Okay, that's going to be the main focus of our discussion. That's background. So let's read inside. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rav Chanan bar Rava, Amar Rav. Okay, it was passed down a lot of people, but the first people it was passed down, okay, in the end it was passed down in the name of Rav, but it was passed down from Rav Chanan, the son of Rav Chisda, in the name of his father, Rav Chisda. So what did he say? There's 24 non-kosher birds. Amar le Rav Chanan bar Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda. So Rav Chanan bar Rav Chisda says to his father, Dehecha, where? I don't see 24. Pretty basic question. Ida Vayikra esrim havu. Ida Mishneh Torah esrim v'chad havu. Okay, if it's Vayikra, it's 20. If it's Devarim, it's 21. How'd you get to 24? B'chi tema, or how did Rav get to 24? B'chi tema. Now, if you want to say da'ah d'chtiva b'Vayikra v'lo k'tiva b'Mishneh Torah shadya alayu. Okay, well, look, we said that the da'ah, which was number 4, in Vayikra, doesn't appear in Devarim. So let's take it and add it to the list in Devarim and say there's the Da'ah and there's the Ra'ah, right? They're 2 different birds. So add, and that's why I put at the bottom here, although you see it's kind of in yellow because it's not really in the Torah, and it's crossed out because we're going to reject this. But maybe number 22 should be the Da'ah. And basically say, look, there's one in Vayikra that doesn't appear in Devarim, so let's add this to the Devarim one. The Devarim one already has 21. We're closer to 24. Add another one, we get to 22. Okay, but Akat Yesru V'Trein Havu. Okay, that's still only 22. Amar le hachi amar avua di'imach. So he said, this is what the father of your mother said. Mishmei de Rav, in the name of Rav. Limina, limina, limino, limineu. Okay, now we go back, and that's why I bolded them. The 4 times limina appears, the ayah limina, the orev limino, the netz limineu, and the anafa limina in Vayikra. And like I said, there's one change in Devarim, but the basic point is, in each book, there's 4 liminos, limineu, liminim, whatever, which means, and another type that's like it. So that adds 4. Harekan arba. That is 4 more cases. Okay, is that a good answer? Well, if we're up to 22 and we add 4, the basic math gets us up to 26. So he says, okay, well then there's 26, not 24. So Amar Abaye, da'a v'ra'a achati. Okay, this is why I take da'a off the list. Okay, now we're going to be at 25 because we remove 1. And we say, like I kind of intimated at the beginning, da'a and ra'ah are really one and the same. Okay, and it makes sense because that's number 4 there, that's number 4 there. After they both appear the ayah, right? They're not off on the list. Okay, and dalet and resh get confused in people's minds, in texts and minds and this. Okay, let's just assume they're the same. Now, you can't just say that. You have to kind of prove it. Well, now, if you thought they were 2 separate ones, now we have a problem. This is going to be a theme that's going to come up in a bunch of the claims we're going to make. Turning now to Amabet. Now, this is something we're going to prove later in the Gemara. They're going to use the case of the animals and why are the animals that are kosher repeated. Okay, why is the whole section of the animals repeated in Devarim? Okay, this is always a question: why things appear in Devarim and when they appeared somewhere else? And the usual explanation is they're coming to add something that wasn't said before. Okay, so the first time they're mentioned, things are missing. And later they add more things. Why? That's a whole separate question, but we're not going to get into that now. So if Mishnah Torah, the Sefer Devarim, is coming to add on to what was said before, then, right, because remember, this is all Moshe's last speech to the Jewish people, and maybe he wants to add things. So, okay, well then something doesn't make sense here. Da'ah doesn't appear in Vayikra, but appear, right, and I'm sorry, Da'ah doesn't appear in Devarim, and therefore we want to take the Da'ah from Vayikra and add it to here. But if you notice, right, how could it not appear in Devarim? The whole theory is that Devarim is just coming to add. So it must be that when it says Hara'ah, it really means Hada'ah, because it doesn't make any sense that anything in the list, right, and so far, if we put Hada'ah and Ra'ah as the same, then basically it fits the theory that Mishnah Torah is adding, because it adds, remember, number 6. Hadaya lemina. That was the only one that didn't appear before. So then Mishnah Torah is adding. It certainly it's not going to eliminate something that was said earlier. That doesn't make any sense. So da'ara must be the same. Elishmamina min ra'a v'da'a chati. Okay. So that helped us because what did it do? It said, get rid of this da'a at the bottom. Don't add it to the list. Da'a is ra'a. It's already in the list. Okay, but that doesn't help us completely because that only got us 1 number less. Remember, we were at 26 because we had the 20. We started with 22 because we added the da'a. We added the 4 of limina, and now we took away 1. So we're back to 25. But we're still, right? Still 25. We're looking for 24. So now Abaye comes again. Amar Abaye. Kashem, now I'm looking at the chart at the bottom. Okay, da'ar are the same. Rav Chanan bar Rav Chisda here. Now comes Abaye and says, Kashem shera'a v'da'a achati, kach aya v'daya achati. We're now going to put together 5 and 6. We thought that there was this daya lamina, right, that came up here. Hadaya lamina number 6 that we were puzzled by, right? There's this extra one that doesn't appear in Vayikra. We're now going to say that that's actually the same as number 5. And then we're going to get rid of number 6 entirely in Devarim. And then the lists are going to match up number 1. And we're going to have 2 lists of 20 and add the 4 of lamina, lamino, lamineu, lamina, right? And then we have 24, and that's perfect. Now, how can you say that daya and ayah are the same? So they're going to prove it in the same kind of way, but a little bit more complicated. And if you thought there were 2 separate ones, Michti Mishnah Torah lo sufe huda'ata. Again, the theory that Devarim is adding. So we have a bit of a problem. Okay, actually, I'm going to look at it up top because it's bolded here. It's a little easier to see. Maishna hacha dichtiv limina a'aya, u'maishna hatam dichtiv limina adaya. Sounds very, right? It's all very confusing if you don't look at the chart. Now, in number 5 in Sefer Vayikra, it said the ayah limina. But when it appears in Devarim, it just says ha'ayah. It doesn't say limina. Now, if we're saying limina means and another type that's just like it, Then, why would it say in Vayikra, 5 would be kind of 2 birds, the yaya and the mina, and in Devarim it's only 1 bird? That doesn't make any sense. And specifically, where does it say lemina? And this is what I pointed out in the beginning. In the word daya, it adds lemina instead of aya. So to resolve that, they say it must be that aya ela daya shma mina, aya v'daya achati. It must be, there's aya lemina and Vayikra, and there's aya and daya lemina, and aya and daya are just the same bird with different names. Okay, now we're going to have to explain why I give it 2 names, right? Why I mention both names here in the Torah. Why don't we just call it the yaya, and then you know the yaya is the daya, and why are you confusing us? If they're all the same, okay, but before we just move on to the question, I want to make sure everyone's clear. At this point, we've taken 4, right? Da'ah and ra'ah are the same, and that got rid of our thought that maybe da'ah was 20, number 22. And we took now number 6 in the Devarim side, da'ah lemina, we said it's the exact same one as number 5. With that, we only have 4 and 5. We don't have 6. We got rid of 6. That gets us up another number, right? Down another number. That means that, think of the list moving up. Now we only have 20. And if we have 20 and we add lemina, lemine, lemina, lemino, we end up with another 4 and 24, and that's our magic number. So we figured it out. Now they want to know, okay, but if you're going to say that ayah and daya are the same, then why on earth do we have 2 of the same bird on the list with different names? So why write both names? Well, Kidutanya, as appears in this bright time, this is actually pretty logical. Rebbe Omer, Ekrani ayah, daya lama ne'emra. Okay, right, I'll read ayah, so why do we need daya? We don't want to open any room for confusion. Okay, that someone could come and start arguing. What does that mean? In other words, what will happen, right? If the bird is an ayah and I call it a daya, I might think like, oh, that's not your bird. That's not the bird mentioned in the Torah, and they might claim this bird is kosher. But some people call them ayah, some people call them daya. So the Torah has to say both so that everybody knows what bird we're talking about. Because if you know it is a daya and you don't know it is an ayah, then how are you going to know? Which, it's true that we have all this problem of identifying all these birds. So this doesn't resolve all our problems, but at least, we'll create less confusion with this ayah and daya. Okay, and that's all, right? In the end, the ayah and the daya are the same. Okay, so again, what we said is ra'ah and da'ah, which one is in Vayikra, one is in Devarim, they're the same. And the 2 in Devarim that look as if they're 2 separate ones, and we listed them originally as 2 separate, are really one and the same. That's the ayah and the daya. Okay, this wasn't confusing enough. We're going to have more. So now that's the list of 24. Meitive. We have one more question before we go on. Lama nishnu b'beima mipnei hashisuah. Okay, this is what I said we were going to get to later. Why are they repeated, the animals, in Devarim? Because they added the shisuah, which is this other animal. Ube'ofot mipnei ra'ah. And in the birds, they added it because of the ra'ah that wasn't mentioned in Vayikra. Now, didn't we just say the ra'ah is the da'ah and it was mentioned in Vayikra? Right? Now, my love midibeima dahatam lo sufe ofot nami lo sufe. It sounds like there, the animal, well, the shisuah wasn't listed at all before, so it's to add. So aren't we assuming then, and this was the premise of the whole thing, that Mishnah Torah adds things that weren't listed before. So don't we assume when it says the ra'ah was added in Devarim for the birds, it must be to add another bird to the list. And then that goes against what we just said, which is it's not adding, it's just the same bird with a different name. So they say, lo, hatam lo sufe. When the with the animals, it's coming to add another animal. Aval hacha leperushe. By us, it's coming to explain something, right? To say the da'ah is the ra'ah. Okay? The ra'ah, right? The da'ah listed in Vayikra is also called the ra'ah. Now, upligi de Rabbi Aval. Now they're going to say, here comes our other. So we resolve the difficulty because it doesn't necessarily mean it adds, it just explains. The da'ah and the ra'ah, they're the same bird. Now we're going to hear Rabbi Aval. Da'amar Rabbi Aval. Okay, now this is going to get a little bit confusing based on what we saw before. So I'm going to share my screen again and we're going to follow along in the chart. Okay, go to the bottom chart on the page. Okay, you can already see what's going to happen here. We originally have 4, 5, and 6 that we cut down to 4 and 5 in Devarim, right? Now we're going to take 4, 5, and 6 and make them, or 4 and 5, which we were down to, and make them all into 1. Okay, and that's how we're going to cut another number and get down to 23. Okay, that's the premise. I figured it's easier to say it straight from up front, and then it'll be easier to follow. Ra'ah zo ayah. Okay, because all these names sound the same, it makes it very confusing. So now I'm going to look up at the top, and we're going to see. The Ra'ah is number 4 in Devarim. Okay, the Ra'ah is the same as the ayah. Okay, it's the same as number 5, which appears both in Devarim and in Vayikra. Now, at this point, we don't know that the Ra'ah is the Da'ah. We're starting clean slate. So number 4 in Devarim, the Ra'ah, which doesn't appear in Vayikra, we're assuming does appear in Vayikra, it's known as the ayah. Okay, it's number 5 in Vayikra, and it's number 5 in Devarim also, and they're all one and the same. So why'd they call it Ra'ah if it's really ayah? Because it has excellent vision. Where did we get this from? Nativ lo yida'o ayit, v'lo shezavto ein ayah. Okay, it's a path that the ayit doesn't know, and it's a path that the eye of the ayah never saw. Why? The eye of the ayah never saw, because it's something, right? The ayah can see really far. This, by the way, the book Ein Ayah is a book of Rav Kook. He wrote on Agadatot of the Gemara, and it comes from this pasuk. Okay, it's a pasuk from Eov. Anyway, the point being that the ayah can see very far, and that's why they call it the Ra'ah, because Ra'ah from Re'iyah, to see. Tana, and another bright about this Ra'ah, and how amazing how far the Ra'ah can see, this ayah can see. Tana omedet beBavel v'ro'an vela be'eretz Yisrael. Okay, this bird can stand in Babylonia and see a dead animal and be able to identify it as a nevela in Israel. Okay, obviously it's a bit exaggerated midrash. Anyway, midara'ah hainu ayah. So now they're going to say, okay, well, if you're going to say the Ra'ah is the ayah, michlal de da'ah lav hainu Ra'ah, right? We're going to assume then the da'ah is not the Ra'ah, because we're connecting the Ra'ah with the ayah, not with the da'ah, like we did before. But that's going to raise a problem, because now we're back to what we saw before. The da'ah is mentioned only in Vayikra, and we already said that makes no sense. It's something would be mentioned in Vayikra and not in Devarim. Michte Mishnah Torah, right? Mishnah Torah is it's like the second Torah. It's a way of, right? It's a word that's used for Sefer Devarim. If Mishnah Torah lo sufei da'ata is meant to add ma'ishnacha dichtiv da'ah, ma'ishnacha de lo ktiv da'ah, then why isn't da'ah pure in Devarim? Ela lav shmamina da'ah v'ra'ah v'ayah chati. Okay, now we're going to connect 4 and 5. Da'ah, ra'ah, ayah, they're all the same. Okay? Because otherwise, da'ah doesn't appear anywhere in Devarim, and that makes no sense. Okay. Now they say, umi de ra'ah hainu ayah, michlal de da'yah lav hainu ayah. Now I want to remind you what we did in the previous. Again, this is very confusing. But 5 and 6 were together in Devarim. Ayah and da'yah. Now we just put together da'ah, not da'yah. Da'ah, ra'ah, ayah. That's numbers 4 and 5. We didn't put together the da'yah. What are we going to do with the da'yah then? We're going to say da'yah isn't ayah. But why did we think that da'yah was ayah? Because of the lemina problem. Remember? It said ayah lemina in Vayikra, and it didn't say ayah lemina in Devarim. And again, if Mishnah Torah is adding, it can't have a bird, the lemina, the extra one that's not mentioned in Devarim, and therefore when it says hadayah lemina, it must mean ayah and da'yah are the same, and that's what we're going to read right now. It actually should be lemina. It doesn't say lemina ba'ayah, ela adayah. And therefore, ela shmamina, what's the conclusion? You ready? Da'ah v'ra'ah da'yah v'ayah achati. Okay? All these 4 are the same. Da'ah, ra'ah, da'yah, ayah. Okay? So with that, we whittle down 4 and 5 and 6 in Devarim to 1 bird. And that got rid of 2 in Devarim, so we're down to, right? We had 21, we're down to 19, and then we add the 4 of lemino, lemineu, lemina, lemina, and we end up with 23. Okay, that's our magic number. Okay, Tanya. Now we're going to just finish up. We have a few more small sections. Tanya, Isi ben Yehuda Omel, Mea ofot me'im yesh b'mizrach. Okay, in the east there's 100 kosher birds. 100 non-kosher birds. V'kulan min ayayin. Okay, all these 100 types are all different types of the ayah bird. Tanya avimi berei de Rabbi Avahu, shva me'ot minei dagim hem, u'shmona me'ot minei chagavim, u'lofot ein mispal. He says there's 700 non-kosher fish, there's 800 non-kosher grasshoppers, and birds, endless. How many non-kosher birds there are? They say, what are you talking about? Ofot? Esrim v'arba'ah havu. Didn't we give it a number? How can you say it's infinite when we have a finite number? Ela u'lofot rim ein mispal. They say it's the opposite. There's no end to how many kosher bird possibilities there are. Tanya, okay, a bright about this. Rebbe Yomel, Galoi v'yadol lefnei misha amar v'aya olam, meaning God knows. There's a lot more non-kosher animals than kosher animals. That's why the Torah listed the kosher birds. The kosher animals. Okay, in the Torah, this is what this drasha of Rebbe is coming to explain is why in the Torah did they list what's kosher when it comes to the animals and what's not kosher when it comes to the birds. So because there's very few kosher, they listed those. And therefore they said the Torah, the kosher ones. Again, this is just saying the one who created the world knows about these things. Makes sense. That the kosher birds are much more than the non-kosher birds. And that's why they listed the non-kosher ones. Okay, so the Gemara asks, what's this coming to teach us really? I mean, okay, you want to tell us that there's more kosher there's more non-kosher animals and more kosher birds than not. Okay, so what? Well, Kiddu Rav Huna Amarav, the way Rav Huna said the name of Rav, it's to kind of clarify this statement. Or some people just say, Amar Rav Huna Amarav Mishum Rabbi Meir, that this whole thing just started out as Rav Huna said this in the name of Rabbi Meir, who this Braita was quoted. La'olam yishne adam l'talmido derech k'tzara. If you're going to teach something, you should always teach it in the shortest manner. Okay, that's always the most clear. Okay, good lesson for teachers. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Of tahor ne'echal b'masoret. You can assume that if you grew up eating a certain kind of bird, and that was the tradition, you can just assume it's kosher. You don't have to start looking into it and researching and all that. Ne'eman tzayad l'mal ze of ze tahor masar li rabbi. You can also trust a hunter, one who catches birds, to say, I know this bird is kosher as my rabbi taught me. Now, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, v'hu shabaki b'henu b'shmotehen. It's only though if the rabbi was knowledgeable in the identification of these animals and their name, right? What they look like and what their names are. By Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Zera asked, Rabbo Chacham or Rabbo Tzayad? What kind of rabbi are you talking about here? You're talking about, it's hard to say this is rabbi. You wouldn't call the hunting teacher your rabbi. But in this language, Rav is just a teacher, basically. So a Rav, is it a Rav who sat in the Beit Midrash learning? Or is it a Rav who's a hunter and knows the identity of birds very well? So, Tashma, let's learn from here. To Amar Rabbi Yochanan, v'hu shabaki b'henu b'shmotehem. Now, Rabbi Yochanan said, as long as they know to identify the birds and their names. Iyamar bishlama Rabbo Tzayad Shapir. If you say the Rabbo is the Tzayad, he's the hunter rabbi, well, meaning, again, not a rabbi, but the hunting teacher, well, then Shapir, it makes sense, because he should be Baki b'henu b'shmotehen. Ela iyamar Rabbo Chacham bishlama shamayim gamer lehu. Ela inu miyad lehu. We get that if you're sitting in the Beit Midrash, you might know the names of the birds, but you're not going to necessarily be able to identify them all, right? If you're not a bird watcher, right? This is like the bird watcher's daf. So, Ela lav shmamina, Rabot Sayad shmamina. It must be, which is fascinating, right? That you rely on the hunter, the teacher who taught you how to hunt, on which birds are kosher, because they know they're much more in the fields. This is like we saw with the treifo, right? The rabbis didn't necessarily know. We had the chizkiah. They said he doesn't really understand, right? There's no lungi things in a bird, right? It's the people who are the slaughterers who know what they're doing. Tanu Rabbanan. Last thing, and this is the same idea of believing people. Okay, ne'emanut as we call it. Lokhim beitzim min ovdei kochavim b'chol makom. You can go buy eggs from any non-Jew anywhere. Now, you don't have to worry that maybe it came from a bird that was a nevela or a bird that was a treifa. Okay, if the bird was killed, right, and then laid the eggs after, or if the bird was a treifa and was very sick and still laid eggs, it wouldn't be kosher eggs, but you don't have to worry about that. I assume just because that's not the majority of cases, right? It's very rare. But they say, what do you mean? Isn't there a concern? Dilma de of tameininu? Isn't there a concern they took it from a non-kosher bird? Can't have an egg from a non-kosher bird. If they told you this comes from this bird, which is a kosher bird, okay, they have to tell you the identity of the bird it came from, and then you can trust them. The whole point is they're believed. Okay, normally you can't always believe non-Jews when they tell you things, but if they say it came from this bird, you can believe them. Why don't we just say, they could just say, this came from a kosher bird. Why does it have to be this particular bird that is kosher? Well, they can, okay, why? Now we're going to learn why they're believed. Because they could trick you. They could say, oh yeah, it's from a kosher bird. And you could say, oh, this doesn't look like the kosher bird. The eggs of my kosher bird don't look like your eggs. And they'll say, oh, that's because mine is from some other kosher bird. But if they say it comes from the identity of it, specifically they say this comes from this particular bird, then you can always check. So they're believed because you can always say, hey, that doesn't look anything like my egg that came from that bird, and then they'll be stuck. So they're believed if they are specific about which bird it came from. So now we're going to end with this question. V'livdok b'simanim. Aren't there signs on kosher eggs? Okay, believe it or not, let's see. Tanya, it says in a Braita. K'simanei beitzim kach simanei dagim. The signs on eggs are just like the signs on fish. Gemara says, what? K'simanei dagim? Salgadatach? Wait, it's scales and fins, okay? That's not, or in this order, it's fins and scales. But that's not on, you don't have fins and scales on eggs. They mean on fish eggs. There's fish egg simanim, and they're the same on the bird eggs, and we're going to get to that next time what that is, and why don't we check with those simanim then? Why do we trust the person without checking? Okay, so very quick summary of our daf. We had a whole list of birds, who they were. We tried to identify some of them when we could, when the Quran was helpful in that way. But again, a lot of it is conjecture. We went through which ones are which, and some ways to remember, and some things. We had that thing about the bird that tells the coming of the Mashiach. And then we got to the number 24 or 23, and how does that correspond with the list that lists 20 and 21? And we talked about the differences between Vayikra and Devarim, and got into which birds on that list really are let, right? It can be classified as the exact same one, just with different names, so that people don't make mistakes. And then we had to add the limino, limina, and to say, oh, there's another 4 in each list. And then we got to the end was about how many, there's endless number of kosher birds, and then we had to always teach in a short manner from that we learned, and then we got to the belief, who you can believe, and on what basis. And with that we finished for today, wishing everyone a good day, and for those fasting, have a good fast.